Hello, and welcome to Autism Resource Central's ASD Advantage podcast. I am your host, Ryan Litchfield. I am a autism and disability self-advocate, and I'm also a graduate from Assumption University, bachelor's degree in Human Service and Rehabilitation Studies, and a certificate in Aging Services. I've been associated with ARC since 2015 as a volunteer and also been doing some guest speaking engagements. My guest today is Andrew. Andrew is a graduate from Clark University in Worcester and recently spent time working for the federal government, and he's here today to share his experiences with us. Hi, Andrew, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So first, thank you for arranging the podcast. It is great to be here. As you mentioned, I graduated from Clark University in 2020. I am also currently pursuing a master's degree in geographic information systems from Penn State World Campus. Right now, I am working part-time at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in my hometown of Milford. I was employed with FEMA up until January 24th of this year. In my spare time, I enjoy reading, listening to music, and learning to play the piano.
Wow, that sounds really interesting, Andrew. Sounds like you have a lot of different hobbies and interests. So I know you meant something mentioned is you have contributed to FEMA. Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences with FEMA?
Yeah, so my time with FEMA really started in May of 2020. As you could imagine, we had this pandemic on our hands and had no clue as to how to deal with it. In addition, jobs were being cut left and right, and I had just graduated from college. I had no clue what to do, so I decided to start asking people for advice, particularly from Clark alumni. I was able to connect with someone who was interning at a company I had interned with a few years back. He said that FEMA was hiring now, and I thought that makes perfect sense. That is when I looked on the government jobs website and found that there was a logistics specialist position in Franklin. At first glance, it looked like mostly computer work, and although I had no real experience with logistics, I thought it would stand out on a resume when applying for future jobs. Now, at first, I felt like I had bombed the interview, and I was caught by surprise when I learned that I might have to drive a box truck. The odds did not seem good, but I ended up getting the job. Despite some hesitancy regarding the whole box truck thing, I was excited to start.
Andrew, I think it's really great that, you took the initiative to take on an amazing opportunity, like this, even just taking the initiative to, consider this type of a position. And it sounds as though that there was a lot of steps along the way to going into, getting a position with FEMA. Could you just tell us a little bit more like how you learned about FEMA? I know I think you mentioned about the one of your colleagues from Clark University, but I don't know if there was any more information in regard to that.
Yeah, that was basically it.
Okay.
Went
Okay.
our conversation through LinkedIn.
Oh, very nice. Okay, good. So what motivated you to go work for FEMA?
A lot of things motivated me. I felt it was something of a duty for me to help. People were struggling to deal with this illness and needed supplies like masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. At the same time, I really wanted to do something and not be isolated like so many other people were. It was close to home and it was for a reputable organization, so I felt I would be foolish not to take it.
It sounds like you have a passion for helping others. Is that something that you thought of even before, like considering a job with FEMA?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to help out as well. I think even before that, I was also considering a job as a contact tracer, which was big during the onset of the pandemic. But ultimately I went with FEMA.
Okay, good. So can you tell us a little bit about what your first year experience was like working for FEMA?
Of course. So there were plenty of ups and downs. I was hired along with two other recent graduates, but their degrees were related to logistics and emergency management. So I felt like something of an outsider. The first few weeks were difficult as I struggled to fit into the whole organizational culture. About a month into the job, I burned my arm on a truck exhaust pipe while trying to talk with a driver, and I ended up having to go to an urgent care clinic. That was fun. Eventually, I settled in and built strong relationships with my colleagues. I was able to learn how to drive the forklift and box truck, and that made me much more of a contributor to the warehouse operations. My main duties at the warehouse were keeping the warehouse organized, keeping a running tally of what supplies we had, looking at logistics documents, loading and unloading trucks, and making supply deliveries all over New England. In February of 2021, I officially became a reservist with FEMA. What that means is that I would do the same things I was doing in Franklin, except in different locations. I would operate on an on-call basis and would have to wait for deployment orders. However, I was able to stay at the Franklin warehouse for a few more months. During that time, I also helped at a community vaccination center in Middletown, Rhode Island, which was very rewarding. All in all, I enjoyed my time in Franklin, even if some of it was stressful. The warehouse closed in June because COVID cases were dwindling and therefore supplies were needed less and less. For a couple of months, I waited to be called to another disaster. At the end of August, I received a notification that I was being called to a disaster, which ended up turning into me helping out in Louisiana in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida.
Wow, that's really incredible.
Mhm.
And just thinking about it, like looking at, where you first started, like just in the warehouse in Franklin, and all these skills and all the knowledge and everything that that you've acquired, during your time just at that warehouse. And then I can only imagine, all of a sudden, going from, one state to another state. Could you tell us like like what kind of thoughts, any feelings you've had, when you found out that you were being deployed from Massachusetts to Louisiana?
Yeah, I must admit that when I first got that notification, I was horrified. But after a few seconds, I got some clarity. I knew that I would have to pause my part-time job at Amazon, leave home the next day, and potentially put my master's studies on hold. This is the feeling that I fear the most, having to do something completely different on short notice. What added to the stress was the fact that I needed to fly out the next day. I had to go to the Personnel Mobilization Center in Texas. This is where reservists often go to be processed and then sent out into the field. I have been to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex before, as my half-brother and my family lives there, but I was still extremely nervous.
Yeah, I feel like that would be anybody would be nervous in that situation. I mean, I can only imagine all the things that were going through your mind too, like just
Mm.
through that whole process. Uh, it's but I think it's it's incredible that that you had the opportunity to actually go from one state to another state to help others, especially in times of disaster and stuff.
Mm.
Going back to Louisiana. So while you were there, can you tell us like some of the things that you've experienced that were challenging, and some of the things that you came out of it that were successful?
Absolutely. So starting at the very beginning, I first flew down to Dallas and stayed at the PMC, which was in a nice hotel. For the first few days, nothing happened. I knew they were trying to decide where to send all these employees. I had about a 75% certainty that I was heading to Louisiana, but it was not guaranteed at first. I overheard some people saying they were going to help out with the wildfires in California and others assisting at a vaccination site in Philadelphia. But when I got the go ahead to go down to New Orleans, I was not the slightest bit surprised. The New Orleans airport was closed for obvious reasons, so I had to fly into the airport at Jackson, Mississippi, get a rental car, and drive a few hours down to the New Orleans airport where they had set up a trailer camp for us responders in the parking lot. It had electricity, food, and laundry service, and there was only one person allowed per room for COVID reasons. However, as you could imagine, I did not enjoy it all that much, mainly because of the sudden change of circumstances. One day I was staying in a nice hotel, and then I was in this camp surrounded by people I did not even know. For a little under 2 weeks, I did nothing. I had no assignment, as those in charge of overseeing disaster response were frantically scrambling to get everyone organized. I would much rather have been helping than hanging around this place. The good news is that I made a few connections with people I thought I would be working with. They were much older than me, but were more than happy to give some advice on how I could navigate my first deployment. In addition, I was able to find a hotel in downtown New Orleans. I was pleasantly surprised at this because from what I had heard, we could go a month without staying in a hotel because they were being reserved for disaster survivors, and rightfully so. I moved there, but again, there was nothing for me to do. That is until a few days later when I received a call saying that I would be working at the Joint Field Office in Baton Rouge. I had experienced this dread when I went to the responder camp, and now it was happening again, but at a larger scale. I had just settled into New Orleans and then learned that I had to spend 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, even getting to and from work. I must admit that I had a nervous breakdown when I learned this. I had no idea how long this would last or if I would have to halt my schoolwork because of this. However, all I could do for now was go with the flow. They had me working in the supply room at the JFO, where I helped load and unload trucks and keep track of what was entering and leaving the room. There were a lot of positives that came from that experience, including me making some more friends and even reuniting with some people who I worked with up here in Massachusetts. In addition, I was able to carry on with my schoolwork. However, there were some challenges as well. I had a difficult time navigating the complicated travel voucher system and getting my payments on time. In addition, I got into a minor car accident and had to go through that drawn out process as well. A few more nervous breakdowns followed. I wanted out, as you can imagine. FEMA rules state that you should spend at least 30 days at a disaster before opting out. And so I kept that in mind until about October when I decided that I want to go home. The stress was really getting in the way of the work I wanted to do. And as much as I wanted to help disaster survivors as much as I could, it was just too much to deal with.
Wow, Andrew. I mean, first of all, I just want to say I give you kudos for putting yourself out there and really trying to make such a tremendous impact. Not even just in Massachusetts, but in another state like Louisiana. As you mentioned earlier, it sounded as though you have a passion for helping others, and I
Mm,
think what's great about trying new things is that you learn a lot about yourself, and you also you also learn what those experiences are like, and you get to you obtain those skills, and and the knowledge, and oftentimes even just from those types of experiences could be transferable to other potential opportunities down the road.
right.
And again, I mean, honestly, it'd be nerve wracking, I think, for anybody to, all of a sudden, going from one state to another state, having to go from, different environment to different environment, and then, having, all these different, job duties and responsibilities as somebody contributing to
Mm,
FEMA. So I think, again, that's something to be very proud of. And, you know, I think you know, I think that's what's great is, I think that's the great thing about life is, it's great to, put yourself out there and try new things,
mm.
because life is all about trial and error, it's like,
Yeah.
there's times in life where, there's things that are going to work out, and then there's things that, may not work out. But you know what? It's like you learn more about yourself as a person, and you learn more about, a lot more about your strengths. And eventually, and that's the key, for almost anybody, including yourself, is it's a lot of reflection, and it's a lot of being able to, just identify, what your passion is, what are your goals in life, and
Mhm.
so I think, despite the fact that there were some difficulties, there were some hardships along the way, you know, I mean, again, I mean, I give you a lot of credit for doing what you did. So I mean, again, I think that's something to be really proud of. And and it's a story worth sharing, not just here, but I think, with other people, other people, in communities, and and whoever, you think might benefit from listening to those stories, maybe
Mm.
especially to other people that may want to think about going into FEMA, like, I don't, have you ever thought about, do you know of anybody else that was thinking about going into FEMA at all?
Um, no, not nobody that I've met outside of the organization has considered it.
Well, I think what's good, Andrew, is you can shed that light on what if somebody ever brings up the interest of working in FEMA.
Yes.
So I think, if they haven't expressed an interest, you can share those experiences that you've had, just to give them, an idea of, what to expect in
Mm.
that. So just one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, Andrew, is like, what were some of the most important lessons that you took away from your experiences with FEMA in Louisiana?
I think the most important thing I learned is that I could not have a job where large scale changes happened on a regular basis. Me learning I had to commute from New Orleans to Baton Rouge and vice versa was the biggest example of this. I know that change is a part of life, but having to deal with this kind of stuff on a regular basis only added to the stress. I ended up resigning from FEMA a few weeks ago. It was difficult to say goodbye as I appreciated everything the agency did for me and all the help I got from its employees, as well as the opportunity to assist in disaster recovery. However, I just did not want to go through another 2 months of pure stress like I did in Louisiana. Um, Overall, this was a challenging experience, even for someone not on the spectrum, but I am glad I gave it a shot. It certainly does not help to step outside your comfort zone from time to time.
Absolutely. I think, as I mentioned a few moments ago, it's what I like about, trying new things, or, in your case, trying something like going, to help people, through FEMA, is you gain experience and you also gain knowledge and wisdom um, from those experiences. And again, like we were just talking about earlier too, you get to know more about yourself. And so, I mean, I commend you for, taking on, this opportunity. And, I hope that you, like, if you go for future job opportunities and, other, like community activities or events, or hopefully, you share those experiences, with those people as well. Because I feel like what the beautiful thing about having those types of experiences is that you are able to share, you're able to share your talents, and you're able to share your strengths, and you're able, and that eventually opens doors uh, for more potential opportunities down the road. So with that being said, Andrew, is there any, last comments, or, anything else you wanted to say to us today?
I think the one thing I have to add is if you're on the spectrum like me, don't be afraid to try new things such as this. It's definitely a rewarding experience if you are considering going into FEMA or other government agencies. But at the same time, be wary of your mental state and don't push yourself too hard.
Well, Andrew, I really want to thank you for spending some time with us today, to sharing your story and to talk about your recent work experiences. It really was a sincere pleasure having you as a guest, and I wish you all the best of luck in your future career endeavors. So, you have been listening to Autism Resource Central's ASD Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Litchfield. Thanks for listening in. This program is funded by the Massachusetts Department of Developmental Services and administered by HMEA Incorporated. HMEA is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to teach, support, and empower people with developmental disabilities and their families to live meaningful lives of their choice. To learn more, visit autismresourcecentral.org.